G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here to talk to you this time about whether or not local government should be involved in business enterprises. A council actually rang me up this last weekend and asked me this question, and this is my extended answer to the question. It's consistent with the whole purpose of this YouTube channel. I provide a lot of information on natural law philosophy, on economics, on local government matters, on public administration. It's all there to help decision makers so that they can make really good decisions, which is for the benefit of everyone. So I hope you find this helpful. If you do, please give it the thumbs up and please consider subscribing to the channel. Now, the problem is that government and business are completely different things and they have different purposes. The purpose of government is to foster and cultivate the common good. That's its sole source of legitimacy. What is the common good? It's a help accruing to people as a result of our cooperation. So local government in particular is there to coordinate people so that we all work together towards common goals, which makes us all better off. Now, contrast that to business. The purpose of business, as Milton Friedman famously and evocatively said, the purpose of business is simply to make a profit, nothing else. They've got no social responsibility. All those things are great. They've got no interest in the common good. Once again, great. No, their fundamental purpose is to make a profit. And unfortunately, more and more I'm finding that governments are getting confused about whether they should be involved in business, whether they should be involved in making a profit. And they're sort of forgetting about their main remit and where their justification comes from, which is this common good. Now, this has come about because we've had some inquiries of late, so-called expert inquiries, that have pushed the line that local governments need to be generating sufficient own source revenue to be financially sustainable. These people who have pushed this line are entirely ignorant of how intergovernmental grants systems work and are meant to work, what horizontal fiscal equalization is actually about. And I've covered these things in videos elsewhere. My concern is that quite a few governments have gone into business simply to generate revenue. Now, this is problematic, not only because government and business are diametrically opposed with very different objectives, but it's also problematic because it exposes citizens to risk and puts the organisation of government under stress. So one of the things we've got to answer before we can understand why business is a problem for government is, why does business get such high returns on their money? Why do they make profits in the first place? Well, it's all about risk. And the higher the risk, the higher return on your money you should receive, because you've got to be compensated for that risk. Now, most citizens, when they vote for their local government or government of any description, aren't thinking about risk. Unlike someone that buys a share on the share market, an equity, who accepts risk and knows that they'll get a high return if their risk pays off, when people go and vote in an election, they're not thinking about government taking on risk and them having to cover the costs if the risk goes bad. And in the worst case scenario, local government that gets into business, if the business goes bad, the local government will go into financial administration, taxes will go up, and citizens will have to pay the cost of the risk that's gone bad. So we need to be aware of that key difference. Now, there are a number of other problems associated with local government conducting business. It distracts local government from its core remit, which is fostering the common good. It distracts organisational attention away from what they ought to be doing, delivering services such as transport infrastructure and the like. And I know from talking to governments, local governments who run businesses, that it does chew up a disproportionate amount of their time. It's often incompatible with the staff culture. Most people that join a local government to work for a local government, they're concerned about things like equity and transparency and accountability, democracy, things like that. Now, remember, business is concerned about making profit. They see people not as citizens, people with needs that we try to meet, but as opportunities to generate profit. And for a lot of staff in government, that will be very confronting. When government goes into business, it distorts local economies. So when a local government runs a childcare centre, it makes it difficult for the existing childcare centre operators to compete. They don't have the financial resources that a local government has behind them. They don't have the coercive taxation powers that a local government has. And it makes it difficult for them to compete and to provide the same quality at the same cost. But it also takes away the existential space. If local government's doing business, it's quite possible that private enterprises won't even get involved in the first place. Why move into an area if there's already a local government providing that service? Your customer base will be considerably smaller than what it would be if there was no local government involved in business of the particular business that you're interested in. And one of the other problems I have with it is if this own source revenue has been generated, these profits have been generated to fund local government services, what it means is that essentially all the local government services will be discounted by the amount of the profit made through these business enterprises. And that fuels what we call fiscal illusion. I've spoken about this on other videos too. Fiscal illusion is a problem when citizens don't understand the true cost of the services they're consuming and don't understand the true financial situation of their local government. Now, if you have a for-profit business bringing large streams of revenue, it's quite likely that consumer residents won't be paying the full cost for their services anymore and will think that local government is in a much stronger financial position than what it would be if they were relying solely on taxes and fees. Now, there are some situations, however, where it is reasonable for local government to be involved in business for a short period of time. One is market failure. What is market failure? It's what economists refer to when the normal market fails to provide the goods and services that people need. It happens a lot in rural and regional communities. There's just not high enough population density, high enough population to give them the market that they need to make a sufficient profit to warrant the effort of setting up shop in that particular area. So market failure is a big problem for rural and regional governments. That's why a lot of rural councils run post offices, run banking agencies, run aerodromes, and even run supermarkets from time to time, because if they didn't do it, no one would do it, and people wouldn't have access to essential services. It could be reasonable for local government to get involved in business if there's a new service or new retail enterprise that the community really need and demand, but we know that private business, we've gone out to private business and they've not been interested because they're worried about the risk and they're worried about the viability of business. In those cases, it could be reasonable for local government to set up the business, to take on that initial risk, to establish that it's viable, and once the business is up and running, to sell that on to private enterprise. That could be reasonable. However, I would insist that the people, the citizens, would be asked prior to an election whether they accept that risk and that we got their consent for the risk prior to going into a business enterprise for those reasons. But whatever we do, whether it's for market failure or whether it's to establish a new enterprise in the area that's needed by the community, we must remember that government is not in the business of doing business. As soon as practical, the business should be divested. It should be sold and given to a corporation or a person or even a not-for-profit organisation that's willing to continue those services into the future. So in conclusion, the objectives of business and the objectives of local government completely incompatible. They're fundamentally at odds with each other. There's only very limited circumstances where I would be in favour of local government getting involved in business, and that's mostly due to market failure or when you want to bring a new service into the town, you can't get a private enterprise interested in it. I'm very concerned that some ill-considered comments by some expert panels over recent years have encouraged business to encourage local government to get into business, and I'm very concerned about the risks they've taken on and the fact that a lot of communities don't know that they've been exposed to this risk. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you have, please give it the thumb up and consider subscribing. Thank you.